Hello, everybody, and welcome to another of our Palabra Presents. This time, it's a conversation we've been hoping to put together. We've been wanting to put this together for some time, but a few things like elections and other, pandemics have gotten in our way. But here we are, and today we're with three of my favorite storytellers, who've set a standard for us as we try to pry open the doors of publishing in the United States to more writers of color. I want to thank you all for joining us at this important time. Yes, this is 1 year going into the life of Palabra now. And please look to us here in the very near future as we bring you more stories about, everything from the continuing coverage of the pandemic's impact on our communities, on communities of color, stories about the state of journalists in the newsroom, and importantly, stories about climate change and the impact on vulnerable communities. But you know what? You also got to stay tuned for us because we're going to have some pretty interesting stories looking at our impact on the recent election. And, I suspect we can fill the next 4 years just talking about that subject alone. Well, it just kind of reminds me of being at a wedding and having that drunk deal with the microphone and everybody standing around trying to figure out how the hell we're going to take this mic away. But here we are, and it's up to us to chronicle this going forward. I want to welcome you all today, and I want to start by welcoming my friend, longtime colleague, Alfredo Corchado from the Dallas Morning News, national reporter. With me was one of the correspondents in Mexico back in the day when we were both younger and handsomer. At least I was more handsome back then. Alfredo was still very handsome. And he's the author of Homelands, a fantastic biography of 4 Mexican Americans whose lives straddle cultures, straddle ideologies, straddle languages in the United States and Mexico. Previous to that, he published Midnight in Mexico, which was a pretty stark and stirring account of his time when he was correspondent based in Mexico City. Also with us today, Benjamin Alire Sáenz, one of my personal heroes. He's an award-winning American poet, novelist, and writer of children's books. He is the son of the border, the 4th of 7 children, raised on a small farm near Mesilla in New Mexico. His last novel is The Inexplicable Logic of My Life, which is a fantastic coming-of-age story about teenage Sal and his journey out in a Mexican-American family. Tell us more about that. And his other great works, including my favorite, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. And also with us today is Maria Hinojosa. Welcome, Maria. A longtime friend, a longtime iconic figure for me. She's an American journalist. She's the founder and executive producer of Latino USA on PRX Public Radio. She's also the founder of the Futuro Media Group. It's very dynamic with its hands in everything. It's a great example of what we can do in our community. And she's a longtime voice on the American broadcasting scene, on networks, on NPR, and public television. Maria right now has this book that's out that's just creating waves and has everybody talking about. Once I Was You is a frank, in my mind, a very honest look at her life and her life as a first-generation immigrant and her journey toward this notable place that she now has in American society. It's clear to me from this masterwork, I'm calling it, that her path was anything but easy. And, it's very telling to me because it's very personal in a way. I see myself in what you've written. For example, being a news nerd as a teenager. I recall in my own case, taking a girl out for a date to go see All the President's Men. I mean, my gosh, who does that, right? But reading your book reminded me of those passages when you're eagerly awaiting the next issue of your high school newspaper, So tell Maria, let's start there and tell me a little bit more about what it is that drove you to put these experiences, to put your story on page.
First of all, thank you so much. I mean, oh my God, tantas flores. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And to my colleagues and writers, Benjamin and Alfredo, it's an honor to be on this panel with you. So, I'm a journalist. Like, that's what I do. I'm a journalist, like Alfredo. And so writing books actually is really hard. It's a lot of work. Like when Alfredo, he wrote Midnight in Mexico, he wrote a previous book, he just wrote this book. And I'm just like, no, I hadn't written a book since 1999 when I wrote Raising Raúl, which was a motherhood memoir, because it was just so traumatic of an experience to write a book, in terms of the time that it took, the time away from my family, trying to sell it, having just an okay sales. And so that doesn't really help anybody. And so, I really wasn't planning on writing another book. But in 2016, at the height of Donald Trump's candidacy, somebody who we're not going to be talking about a lot more of in the future, but I went on television on MSNBC, and I had a kind of moment where I said to a Donald Trump surrogate, I said, you don't use the term illegal to refer to a human being. Illegal is not a noun. And I had this moment, and it went viral, and I was like, oh, okay. A colleague actually from Texas told me, you should write that book, Illegal is Not a Noun. And I was like, yes, I'll write a little pocket book, like the one that you pick up at the, when you're getting on the plane, that you'll be done with by the time you get off the plane, like Chimamanda, We Are All Feminists. And I thought it was a great idea. It would get rid of my fear of writing, but it wouldn't be a massive book. And as you know, when you get into the world of publishing, uno no sabe. And they were like, yeah, no, we want you to write a big book. So that's how this was born. It really was pushing me to have to do this work. And so when you say that people are talking about it, I'm just like, they are? Really? Because, I'm talking to you from my bedroom. Like, I haven't left my apartment much at all since March. And so it's, I haven't had anybody hug me in regards to my book unless they're like my family. I haven't seen anybody. So when you say those things about people's response to my book, me llena el corazón, and I give it with a lot of love and humility. So thank you for having me be on this panel too. It's really an honor.
Well, thank you and welcome again. Ben, I'm going to point to you here for a question that we had, I kind of put out to you a little bit before, and what really interests me from your point of view and your position, having been on the scene now for quite a while, and your work stands up and stands out. It just begs the question: our evolution in publishing. Do you see our position today in publishing as Latinos, as writers, as storytellers? Is it improved? Do we have a wider platform now? Or are we as still perhaps uneasy with the platform as we were when you put out your first works in the early aughts? I mean, tell me a little bit about that time and what might be different today.
Well, we have to say, have we made any improvements? Of course we have. We didn't have anywhere to go but up, frankly. When I started off, I didn't start off as a young writer. I was 30 years old. I used to be a Catholic priest. I left the priesthood at the age of 20, almost going to be 30. I started to write. I got a Stedman Fellowship at Stanford, and I, really started to write poetry. But the people that were published back then in the Chicano world were all published in small presses. There was Alurista, Tony Buciaga. There was Alurista. There's all these people, but it was all Ricardo Aguilar and Ricardo Sanchez. And then they were all poets. They were part of the movimiento. But people that were published back then in the New York houses were John Ritchie, and then Arturo Islas, then Sandra Cisneros, then Ana Castillo, and Denise Chavez. And that was about it. That was it. And the rest of us were publishing in small presses. And then I published my first book, my first novel. I had a really bad experience because it was published by a house that didn't know how to publish literary fiction. Hyperion, they didn't stay in business all that long in publishing literature, but it's owned by Disney. And I got a lot of money, and I was really happy because my novel was sold at auction. I thought, I'm going to be famous, and it didn't work that way. They didn't know how to tell a book. They asked me what I thought of the cover, and I said, it was pretty racist. They didn't like the picture I sent to them because they told me, well, you look like a professor. Well, that's what I am, a professor. And so they brought up a photographer out here, and they took a picture of me out in the desert. So I called my editor, Yvonne. Well, did they want me to lean on a fucking cactus? And it was really kind of funny. But I kind of went with it. I thought I was lucky to start publishing. And, it took me a long time to get to the point that I am today. It was just, I was always a tough sell. I got great reviews. I didn't sell many books. I was considered a writer's writer, and not just by Latinos, but, by mainstream. He's a really good writer, but I didn't sell many books, enough that they let me publish the next book, so some. But I'll tell you, the people who really championed my work, I have to say this, in the academic world, in Latino letters, were women. Really, they did. They championed my work much more than my fellow Chicanos. I was kind of, and then when I came out, I didn't sit well with a lot of my readers, my older Latino readers. They kind of abandoned me. But the women kept on championing my work. And I kept writing. And when I got into the young adult novel field, and finally wrote, it was my fourth young adult novel, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, I got a whooping $12,500 advance. The book has sold over 700,000 copies and has been published in 28 languages. I just got an award from in Spain from the Catalanian Booksellers Association. And I thought that was really thrilling for me. It's like, wow. I thought that was really exciting. And I have won a lot of awards along the way, but to me, the only reason why that was important, not that I'm ungrateful, is that it helped me sell books. And that's what I really wanted to do. I always just wanted to be a writer. And it was hard. It's been really hard for me and for all of us. There was a point in time that even after my success, I couldn't publish a book. But I just kept writing what I needed to write. And to arrive at this place is like, it's amazing. It's amazing. I just sold the sequel to Aristotle and Dante, and I can't say anything about it because they're going to make an announcement in early December. But I got a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. I
love hearing those words.
I felt like I cried.
That's worth crying about.
My agent says they didn't give you anything. They're going to make money on this book.
Yeah.
And I did think that, if I told someone I want to write a book, if I went to an agency, I wrote a book. It's 1987. Two Mexican American boys in El Paso, Texas, fall in love. What do you think? That a winner? They'd have looked at me like I was crazy. And I think the only reason that Simon & Schuster took it was, one, my editor was gay, and everyone agreed at the house that my writing was lovely. But they didn't think this was going to be a big seller. It surprised all of us.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, Benjamin, hold that thought for a second, because I'm wondering, now we have, since you paved the way, I think in a fashion, you've opened doors for the rest of us, and in comes, say, a young journalist who's spending time at dodging the nasty words from cartels and others in Mexico City. And Alfredo, I'm wondering if in your time in the ramp up to your first book, if you encountered any of the same preconceived notions about you as a Latino writer, as a Chicano, writing your experiences in Mexico. Did you encounter any of the same things that Ben is talking about with the New York publishers? Or was the reception for you a little different? And Maria, I'll ask you to chime in on that as well. So Alfredo, what was it like when you launched Midnight in Mexico?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you and Palabra for this opportunity, and thank you for the incredible work you guys are doing. My experience was different from Benjamin in many ways, but also similar. And I just want to pick up on something that Maria said. I mean, as a journalist, you don't really think about, at least in my case, I didn't really think about writing a book. I mean, I would be in awe of people who would write books. I remember the first author I encountered was a guy named Ricardo Sandoval and Susan Ferris, the Fight in the Fields. And I thought, wow, just listening to your stories back when we were in Mexico City, I thought, I wish I could do something like that. But it's just something I didn't imagine. I was spending a year at Harvard as a Nieman Fellow. And I would tell you that the key to writing a book is you need 3 friends. You need 2 Argentinians who are just, nothing is going to stop them. They're fearless. And a Swedish writer. And by that, we were on spring break. They had invited me to go to New York and sort of check out the publishing world. I kept telling him, I don't have an idea. I'm not really thinking of a book. He said, well, just come along with us and learn from the experience. I later learned that they really wanted someone who had points for the Marriott or the Hyatt. They wanted someone to pay for the hotel. But I ended up going with them and just kind of learning the experience. And one of the agents that we were talking with expressed some interest in a book about Mexico, and a book about what it's like for a young Mexican immigrant who left Mexico at the age of 6, and then you go back to the country with all these romantic notions about the land you left, and it's engulfed in violence. I mean, how do you put that together? And I kept thinking, okay, well, it's 70, 80, 90,000 words. I can do that. I mean, I'm a journalist. I can write on deadline, etc. And the first few drafts, were just terrible. The agent would, send him back with, just marked up, blah, blah, blah. And one thing he kept saying to me was, you got to get off the sidelines. You have to think differently. You can't be, the guy who's trying to get both sides of the story. You got to tell me what it's like. And I turned to Benjamin Alire Sáenz. I don't know if Ben remembers the moment, but I was in El Paso visiting, and I took Benjamin to a restaurant, and we're having a little tequila, and I'm telling Ben, this is not for me. This is not going to work out. How do I write a polite letter to the agent and say, forgive me for wasting your time, but I think I'd rather be a journalist? And Benjamin asked me one simple question, and he said, I'm asking you a question, and I want you to respond from the heart, and that'll help me determine whether or not you can do it. And he says, what do you think about when I say the word Mexico? What comes to mind? And I wasn't prepared, but there were some napkins on the table, and I took them out. I took my pen, and I told Ben, I said, I think of the rain. He says, what about the rain? And I started, just telling him, and here's the line, when summer rains fall in Mexico, all is forgiven. And I remember writing those lines, and Ben said, keep going. Just kept drawing me out. And he says, you can write. You just have to really dig deeper in you. And that, it really, Maria's right. It is so hard to write. And often it takes a village. I mean, I remember turning to you, Ricardo, many times and saying, "Hey, can you read this chapter? Help me out." But it's really that. I mean, you need to rely on a lot of people to help you, to keep pushing you, to keep believing, because it is a lonely, lonely world and a lonely experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
I keep saying, I don't think I would have gone through these books, Homelands and Midnight, had it not been for the friendship and for obviously lots of tequila, Siembra Azul Blanco, and lots of Juan Gabriel. I mean, to get you in that moment, get you in that mood to write, and so yeah, I thank you guys for having been so helpful.
Yeah, and Maria, I mean, I think it's curious to hear that experience, and maybe it's understandable because these guys are in El Paso. They are quite a distance from New York, right, from the hubbub. You're there. You're in the action. You're in the mix. Was it any different for you? And what was it like from your first experiences to now talking about launching into this new book? And is there a difference? And does it tell us anything about where we are as Latino writers in the publishing field these days?
So look, I have to say, and I love hearing the stories, by the way. So thank you for that. I want to acknowledge that, it takes a lot of privilege to be in this space and to be moving in this circle. So I was very lucky in many ways because I had an agent come to me. The first book that I did, which was Cruise, Gang Members Talk to Maria Hinojosa, somebody heard it on All Things Considered. The editor got in touch. It was a young adult book. By then I had an agent, Susan Bergholtz, who is an icon in terms of Latina writers. And then because I didn't write so much, my agent retired. I had to find a new agent, and I have Adriana Dominguez, Latina. And I searched for an agent for months until I found the right fit, which was really important. But, again, I have privilege. So it's very hard for me to say, what has changed, writ large. Latinos and Latinas, we always have these booms. We've seen it, everybody on this call, on this Zoom. We've seen these amazing moments of a book that, or a movie that is Latino or Latina that just takes off and everybody's like, oh my God, it's your moment, it's your moment. And then all of a sudden it's back to normal and we fall off the wayside. So that's why it's hard for me to opine in general, because I feel like I have it so much easier because I have a name. Now, having said that, and I'm very honest about this, I talk about this with my students because I need them to understand that it's not like you like to talk about when you get rejected, but also you get rejected. So when I told them, I was like, that first book proposal that I wrote with, this small book, and then and then it was and attached to that was another, it was a memoir. And they were like, we don't want the small book. We just want the memoir. They rejected me. I got rejected by every house except for one. I'm here in New York. I'm closer to the circle. I got a name. I'm a Latina. I got an agent. They rejected it. Now, what was happening was that they wanted something else. And so that's where, sorry about that. I did have a conversation with Jonathan Karp. At that point, he was the editor-in-chief of Simon & Schuster. How often does that happen when a writer can have a conversation? And he had rejected the book, but I was just kind of doing an informational, and he could see that I had something to say. So all of this is to say, I don't think it's gotten any easier. I think that there are more people sprinkled throughout. Michelle Herrera Mulligan is my editor at Simon & Schuster. It's a huge position. She's been in this for a long time. Pero no me importa. We have to keep doing this. And we never know when we're going to write that book that is going to sell 700,000 copies. Oh my God, I'm so jealous. I'm like, oh my God, I'm just trying to get to sell 5,000 so I can get on the New York Times bestseller list, and how do you even do that? And so my message is not so much about has it changed. It's that we have a position to take in continuing to write, in continuing to push through. That's why I'm so glad that Alfredo wrote a second book. I thought that this was your third, pa que veas. You come off as such a prolific writer. That we don't stop, that we don't take no for an answer, that we keep on writing. Some of us were born to write. And so you have to keep doing that. Others of us become journalists and then we write books, or it's different. But we need these voices, because here's the bottom line. If they don't have us, there ain't no future in publishing. Bottom line, in terms of our numbers and our demographic and the long term, that is what it looks like. And so we just can't stop. And that's where we have to make sure that we keep the next generation or the writers just not giving up. That's all.
Yeah, and I personally believe that that impact has a lot to do with it. The kind of impact that we as storytellers can have with audiences that sometimes will seem unfamiliar to legacy publishers, right? And so it's almost like we need a chance to show what that potential impact could look like. And, that brings me, Benjamin, to the impact of Aristotle and Dante. And I have to tell you that my daughter is 22. She just graduated from American University in film, so everything's great, right? And so we're having a conversation the other night, and I said, Sophia, what is your favorite book out there? And who is your favorite author these days? Because she reads a lot. And she brought up Benjamin Alire Sáenz. And I said, so what is it about this book, Aristotle and Dante, that really sings to you, that really spoke to you? And she thought about it a little bit, and then she tapped out this following note to me. And I'll just read a little bit from it. But it's all about impact, right? And she says to me, it's hard to articulate how important this book is. When Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe was first released, it was unlike anything else in the YA landscape, the young authors, the young audience landscape. Even today, it remains this gem that is as relevant as today as it was 8 years ago. And she went on to describe the impact that it had for her as representation, not just representation for young people, but for how you spoke to marginalized people and how you brought light and this creativity to a community that often was not addressed in literature or pretty much anywhere else on the American media landscape. And she goes on to say that this book was the first that made me and many of my peers feel understood. The prose gently guides you, takes you hand in hand, and on this immersive and emotional journey. It is a deeply empathetic book, and while it lays bare the terror, the confusion, and the beauty of being young and different, it also shows you how we are seen and that you'll be okay despite it all. So Benjamin, its impact. Have you come to terms with that impact? And is it the kind of impact that you can teach or then pass on to others in our community, and perhaps they would have the same kind of success with their personal stories as you have with Aristotle and Dante?
I don't think it's something you can teach. You can teach technique. You can teach all kinds of things. I've had students who learned the techniques, who were much more gifted than I was, but they didn't have what I had, and that is discipline and desire. And I had that in spades because no one was going to say no. And I was going to write a book. And I mean, one of the reasons I became a good writer is that they can't say no. You know, I mean, they can't. And you know, you have to be damn good. You have to be damn good. I always had to be better because I was Mexican American. You know, I had to be excellent. That's the way it is because it's not fair. No, screw that. It's not fair. I'll be better. I'll get better. But you know, the thing about impacting people, you can't impact people. I always told my students, if it doesn't hurt, it doesn't matter. it's got to hurt you. You've got to reach deep down and be brave enough to be vulnerable, but be vulnerable in a disciplined way. You don't want to just like, be an emotional exhibitionist. On the other hand, in American letters, everyone's sort of an emotional anorexic, because we don't come from emotionally anorexic people. We feel, we love, but young people write to me, and I cry. Mothers, fathers. The most moving. I get letters from men my age, and they all say two things. They have two things in common. One, I wish I'd had this book when I was growing up. To which I say ditto. And the other is, thank you for healing the broken gay boy inside of me. Thank you. And I get so moved because, you see, I was going to write literature. I didn't think about how you move people. I just thought about, I want to be a serious writer. But you can't be a serious writer if you don't move people, touch people. And you can't be afraid of doing that. And that's very difficult. The most difficult thing for me as a writer has been two things. I'm an incredibly sentimental man. And I have to discipline that. I have to hold that back, because I don't want to write a Hallmark card. I want to write serious literature. And the other thing about it's also the other part. You can't discipline too much. You can't write the emotions out of your book. And you can't worry about an audience ever. Write what you need to write. And I have always followed my own heart. I've always written what I needed to write. And it comes from this space, and I know there's a lot of resistance towards us. It doesn't seem, there is. When I won the Penn Faulkner Award, I was so happy. God, that's a great award for any American writer. And then it made me sad when I realized that I was the first Latino ever to have won it. That shouldn't be. And I'm still, it's been 5 or 6 years, 7. I'm still the only Latino to have won it. There is something wrong with the system that excludes us. It's not that we don't have great writers, we do. It's just that so many of us go unheard. I never came into this business thinking that I was going to be a trailblazer. But that was part of my job. And it makes me mad, and it makes me happy, and it makes me proud, and it fills me with all kinds of emotions. But I want to touch people. And you know what? I'm glad I went to this YA field, because there's a little boy inside of me that can be 17, and that's why I'm convincing. Because as some of my friends tell me, when are you ever going to grow up? Grown-ups are, a dime a dozen. But, I like being a boy, and I like being a boy when I write that book, because I am that boy. And I'm not writing the character. I'm writing people. And one of the things I love to write about in my novels, parents. Guess what? There are parents, the young adult, and that's why a lot of people love the book, because our parents are also the main characters. That's unheard of in YA literature. And people, and kids love it. They think kids don't want adults in their novels. Bullshit. They love this book. They're the reasons they sell this book, hand to hand. My readers sell this book. My publishers don't pay for that kind of publicity. They've never paid for that kind of publicity for me. But there's no kind of publicity in a young adult novel. When you see my Twitter, all these years later, a little kid writes a book. I just read Aristotle and not Dante. I'm late to the party. I died, I cried, I died. They're really funny and sweet. And, and they send you messages like, we're making a movie out of it. It's awesome. Lin-Manuel Miranda is our executive producer. And this little guy texts me, Mr. Sáenz, I love your book. Don't fuck it up. Do it. And I just don't. He's 15 years old, and he's going, okay. But they're so invested in this, because you forget the kids that read, they're dorks. They're sweet, and they're hurt. And a lot of them, when you get a text from the young woman and it says, will you be my grandfather? That's so painful because you kind of can imagine what kind of life she's had. And I don't know what to say. There's a lot of hurt kids out there. And I always thought it was so hard to come out for a man of my generation. I thought, it's easy for them. It's not. Because in that moment, when they come out, they feel alone. And it'll get better afterwards. They just feel like, I'm alone. And then they grab a book like mine and they go, oh, I'm not so alone.
Yeah, and that is impact. I mean, as journalists, boy, we live for those moments when we can have that kind of impact. And as journalists, often, because it's just the sheer number of stories that we produce, sometimes the need for that or the importance of that sort of gets lost in our work. And Alfredo, Ben, go ahead. Yeah,
you do make an impact, all of you.
Yeah,
I couldn't do what you do.
And that's exactly what I was going to ask to Alfredo and Maria. In your most recent work, do you recall, or is there a conversation that you've had with a reader or an editor or someone in the business, just anyone who's read the book and really kind of cemented for you that you had impact with this work? Maria, is there something that really stands out? Is there a conversation that comes to mind along those lines?
I mean, like I said, it's hard to do this when you're in quarantine. So it's like you're reduced to what are people sending you on Twitter? What are they saying to you on Instagram? And I long, I did. I had an image yesterday like, oh my God, could you imagine like a line of people bringing your book and that you sign it and you can give it to them, you can give them a hug, because that's me, I'm a hugger. And so in those moments, that's when you have that, that eye to eye, like when somebody's able to say what the book has meant to you. I have to say that it's not just one moment. It's more the fact that people are really, cue the dog, honey, sorry, that it's not just one thing. It's rather that people in general are just feeling very connected to the fact that I was very authentic. So Benjamin, what you're talking about, and the reason why your work is so powerful for all of us is because, you're saying you can't teach that authenticity. You can't teach that, like what Alfredo said. I think you said, no sé, una tequila, and then because I don't drink tequila because I'll get drunk, and then that wouldn't be good for the writing. But like that ability to go in deep. That is the thing that I think connects us to the readers. And that's why we feel so particularly special that readers connect with our work, because we are being authentic. We are being very honest. We have very good editors so that we don't come off highly emotional, as Benjamin was saying, right? We don't want to be, because I'm also highly emotional. And that's why we have a great editor to just be like, yeah, no. So to me, it's about that opening up, and that leads you to the next place in terms of the writing.
Right. And Alfredo, your last book, Homelands, was very intimate in that it got into your relationships with three people who you sort of grew up with in a way, who sort of track you through your adult life in the United States. And I'm wondering if a conversation with them was revelatory, just in terms of you reached somebody, or realizing that you actually reached an audience, or that there are more than just you four in this book that have this experience, that have lived through what you've lived through.
Yeah, I think that's been the best part of writing Homelands. I wrote it, as you said, as an intimate story with three other friends: Primitivo Rodriguez, immigrant rights activist who's now in Mexico City, David Suro, who's the restaurant owner at Tequilas in Philadelphia, and an attorney, Ken Trujillo. But it's and I feel for Maria, because it's that moment, when you're doing a book talk, or you're at a bookstore and people come up to you, and people from different nationalities, Indian Americans, people from all over the world would say, that your book spoke to me as the experience. The fundamental question you lay out in Homelands is, how do we fit in? And I think, if anything, the last 4 years has been about that question for many of us as immigrants. How do we fit in? And it's especially I think a poignant moment in the 2020 elections. The night of, who is a Hispanic vote, who is a Latino vote. My agent, Jessica Freeman, took that moment to immediately say, it's time for you to write that next book. I've been sort of on the sidelines, using every excuse in the world to avoid, writing that book again. But she says, there's still so much confusion. There is that need to just keep writing. And Maria's right. I mean, we're in this situation where we're somewhat privileged, that you also have a responsibility to continue writing and writing. So the bookstore owner here in El Paso, dear friend to Benjamin and myself, wrote up and called up and said, "You're not going anywhere. This is the moment. You're gonna have to keep going." It's very encouraging, but it's very scary. It's like, getting that big Sunday piece that you have to write. Except you might have it a couple of years, but it's that writer's block. So I'm sure I'm going to be reaching out to you again, Ricardo, and Benjamin. Get ready for that lunch.
All right, you're on. Hey, listen, we're going to take some questions here from our audience here in a minute. But going into that, let me ask, and let's bring in this specter of what we're living now, right? I mean, now we've got this election and its aftermath sort of hanging over us. There's all these questions that arise about the impact of Latinos and the impact of us on the national political stage. And I'm wondering, from your positions in writing about this, is there something that we can take away from this that's going to mark us going forward now for the next 4 years, as journalists, as writers, Ben, as observers of American life? What is it that you can point to that's going to say, this is us now going forward?
To me, it's a battle against invisibility. I mean, here we are, like in many ways, like the center of the conversation, the jumping off point for Donald Trump to launch his campaign on our backs. All of the horror and torture and human punishment that he has inflicted. And at the same time, just kind of feeling like we are. So yes, Alfredo, I mean, actually, you should write that book. Sorry. You should. I can't announce because it's not public, but there's already something else that's happening for me. So I think that this is actually a really challenging time, because I think we worry about the invisibility factor, and at the same time, the attention, but the right attention. So I think we're really in the midst of it. Earlier, just before I came on this call, I was doing an interview with Al Jazeera, and it was a media interview, and they were talking about, what's going to happen in terms of journalists and how they respond to what's happening, with Donald Trump and his lies about the election being stolen. And I was like, well, we're witnessing it. Like, whatever is going to happen at Fox News because of Rupert Murdoch's internal family discussions, like, we're going to find out at a certain point, will Fox News turn away, not for an ethical reason or a political reason, but for an audience reason, for a money-based reason. And so the impact of what we're living through right now is going to be deep. It's not going to be pretty. And so I don't mean to put pressure on either Alfredo or Benjamin, although Benjamin just said that he just got paid, so yay. But rather, it's like we said, this responsibility. Like, we have to continue to try to talk about this, because We've been through this before. We've been through this. You know this, Ricardo, as well, that it's just like, oh my God, the fascination with Latinos and Latinas, and then bloop, we're gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, hey, listen, and I think dovetailing on that, the question from the audience, I think it's a really salient question. And this is for the three of you, you know, and I think as our padrino in a way, Benjamin, you can take the lead on this. What's the advice that you would give to a journalist of color, a writer of color, who wants to explore writing a book? Is there anything out there? Is there anything in the experience that you would put on the table for us to consider as we're getting into this process? Something that you didn't know then, but boy, you know now. And what would you tell a young journalist of color, a writer coming up who wants to take on the challenge of putting their life story in a book?
Well, there, you know, all of us, whether we realize it or not, you know, I'm sure you said, I want to be a journalist. And, you know, it was a journalist, but how do you be a journalist? How do you do that? How do you be a writer? What you have to do is, like, you know what stories you want to write. You know what you think as a journalist needs to be addressed. You don't have to ask anybody. Do it. Do it. You may have other assignments, but come back to it and do it. That's what you have to do. I knew what I wanted to write about all the time. I wanted to write about my people. I came back to El Paso because I wanted to live on the border, because these are the people who've given me my voice. These are the people who've given me my heart. And I love the border, and I wouldn't live anywhere else. And I return the words that were given to me by the people of the border back to them. And that's, I always knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to represent my people, but I wanted to do it honestly. Not as a cliche, not as, like, you know, every woman makes tortillas and all that stuff. I wanted to represent us as we are now. We are a modern people, a sophisticated people, an educated people, and we are hardworking people. We have made this country, we have helped make this country great. And we have never been thanked for that, and we never will be thanked. But that's no reason for us not to keep on fighting and telling people we have a voice, and it is a beautiful voice, and we know it. Just do it. You're not going to get you're going to get some support, but you're going to get a lot of pushback, because they want you to think like them, to be like them, and we're not. Which is not to say that we're better.
Exacto.
But you know what? White people aren't better. They don't have to be. They're just people.
Exactly. And you know, Alfredo, you and I have heard the word no quite often in our careers, right? Editors telling us no, you know, the people who believe they're in a position to be able to know better tell us no. Do you hear no less often these days, given your success, given the impact that you've had with your 2 books and your work as a journalist?
No, I don't hear the word no. I just wish that I was lucky, like Ben, to get this huge contract where you don't have to you know, get a contract and then go off and look for all these fellowships to try to make things work for it. And when you take a leave of absence. But, you know, to that person who asked the question, you know, how, the advice to a person of color, you know, the outcome of this election underscore that this community is going to be incredibly important, incredibly relevant. I mean, if you're looking just at El Paso, just the U.S.-Mexico border, we are ground zero for what's to come. You know, Trump lost, but Trumpism is alive and well. And the community, this community that's been a witness to separation of families, you know, MPP, the border wall, and was the site of a massacre that targeted Mexican Americans in August, start of 2019. Those issues are going to remain front and center for many years to come. So I don't hear the word no as much as I used to, But you know, that person who asked that question also has to take some time and do some homework. I mean, go back and listen to this palabra video and take the names of the people that I mentioned, the people that Maria mentioned, and go back and you know, I mean, it's just basic journalism. You know, follow the lead. There's a guy who helped me. It was been incredible from Mexico City and now in New York City. Cristobal Pera. He's one of the most, you know, gifted editors, agents, but also, you know, he nurtures young writers. I mean, look for people like him and others who really believe in your story and believe in the importance of you telling these stories. And you'll be surprised. I mean, I think there's a lot of support because, as Maria said, we are the future. I mean, if that fails, if that experiment fails, it's a huge hit to the industry in general.
Great. And Maria, for you, one piece of advice that you would pass on to the next generation, to the others who are coming up behind us, what would you say to someone who's looking to write a book?
Don't stop. I think one of the things that Benjamin said that is really important, and it is hard, is the discipline. So you have to find a way. And again, I mean, I write every day, but I'm not a writer of books. So for me, it was an entire mind shift, right? How do you do that? You know, how do you create time in your life? And everybody's going to do it differently. It may turn out that you have no option but to write, you know, early in the morning, because that's the only opportunity. But if that's the case, then you have to do it because it is the discipline. I had so much fear. It's very scary. There is a lot of rejection. People are reading your work, so it's very scary. So I would just say don't stop, because we need your work, right? Especially if you actually want to publish a book, because I didn't know that. I mean, remember, there were no Latina journalists when I was growing up. So that's why you read Once I Was You. So you can be just like, what? There were no Latino or Latina journalists. We didn't exist. So I was not sitting around saying, oh, I'm going to write a book. No, o sea, no entraba en mi mente. So if you have that in your mind, you already come from a place of a privilege in your mind that you can conceive it. And now we just need you to like not give up. And it's going to be hard, but everything is hard. Except I really wish I was in El Paso right now. Like, thank you guys for just like, you know, constantly just ramming it in that you're in El Paso. Because if you read Once I Was You, in the end, El Paso actually is like hugely important in everything that has happened to me in my life. It was, you know, I was there during the massacre. I ate Cristóstomos. I was in Juárez in January. So I'm just saying El Paso, Juárez, like seriously with the food thing on top of everything, I wish I was there. Okay, I'm done.
I think we all wish we were there. And, you know, and Ben, go ahead. Tell me.
We used to call El Paso when I was growing up Chicano Nirvana.
Hey, oh my gosh, yeah. Alfredo, let's go have some tequilas at Pelicans. Is it still there? You know?
Yeah, still there. Still
Right,
there. But we have other places that offline I'll tell you about it.
Okay. But hey, guys, you know, listen, it's just the last word, and palabra is all about the last word. You know, we have some pretty difficult times ahead for us here. Not only are we being very introspective now as a community, but I think we all have to be introspective in our roles as journalists. And real quick, around the table, what is your next project? What do you think is next and important for you to put down on paper or in words? Just a quick summation of what you have next on your plate.
I'm writing a memoir of the pandemic time, and it's entitled "Visiting Hours Are Over."
Yes.
Who will love you when no one comes to visit?
Nice.
Is that a sheep shop, Ben?
Maria, how about you?
So I have multiple projects that are going on. Some of that I can't talk. I mean, one of them actually involves a story that I did in El Paso. Again, to me, El Paso just keeps on coming. You may know the story of Estrella, who is the first undocumented immigrant that we know of that was taken from a courtroom. She's trans. She's in a men's prison in North Texas. We're doing work around her story, expanding her story. I've got a big project about reimagination. This is all podcast. But in terms of the writing, like I said, something's coming up. It is tied to Once I Was You, so I guess you can probably guess, but I can't make a formal announcement just yet. So I'll be working on this. And then I actually know what the next, if I didn't have anything to do, the next book that I would be writing, I already have the title, which I did not have for Once I Was You. So congratulations, Benjamin, that you have a title, because we died. We did not have a title for Once I Was You until the end. And now I love my title. But the title for the book would be Suave Estrella Maria. And it's about my multiple relationships with Suave, who served time, was sentenced to life in prison right outside of Philadelphia. So we've got that, Alfredo, and we're releasing a documentary about him because I've been following his story for over 25 years. He finally got out, even though he was sentenced to die in prison. And Estrella is Estrella, the trans woman, and Maria is either myself or my daughter. So I have multiple projects, and I just want to say how filled with gratitude I am to be in that place, that I can say that, because I recognize how many of us are teetering. And so I'm just really hoping that the people who are teetering find the support that you need. Do not give up. And we're hopefully there are mejores momentos que vienen, because we need you.
That's true. And Alfredo, what are you working on now?
I haven't had the luxury to really sit down and think about a book project. I mean, I know that moment will come sooner or later, but it has been nonstop as a journalist. I mean, covering the border the last few years, I mean, you're constantly thinking about what's to come. And right now we're going through this transition between Trump and Biden. So, I mean, there are at least 5 stories that I can think of that we're working on for the next few days. But at some point, hopefully over the holidays, Benjamin and I will get together again over napkins and start talking about the next book.
Yeah,
look at that pressure, Benjamin.
After interviewing me, I haven't seen for a long time, even though we live in the same town. This is how we begin our conversations. He starts asking me all these questions, and I think, oh, I'm being interviewed.
Hey, he's a reporter. He can't get away from it. Hey, listen, everybody. Hey, thanks for your time. This has been fantastic. I hope everybody out there who's been watching us and listening to us will take away that little something. And the most important, the thing I think that we can all take away from us is that we do have a pretty impressive future. I mean, there's no denying that we are here, that we as Latinos have a very valuable, increasingly diverse, and unavoidable voice in media on the American landscape, and we're repainting it as we go, which is what I love about your work as individuals and your leadership in the Latino community and for American journalism and letters. You know, that's such a beautiful word, letters. Benjamin, thank you. And so listen, everybody, thank you very much for spending time with us. Do look to Palabra, hashtag whatever, but on Twitter, you find us as at Palabra NHJ. On Facebook, it's NHJ Palabra. Look for us, because we're going to be coming up with some pretty interesting stories from Stockton, from Philadelphia, from Arizona, from Zacatecas. We're everywhere, and it's because of you guys. So thanks again for spending time with us. We'll look forward to the next meeting.